Yeah, I think I learned the rudiments of music in the class, playing guitar, you know, the basics of what chords meant and what notes meant and you know, certain terms and that sort of thing. I suppose the real education came with playing along with records and learning it that way, and also playing with other musicians and finding out, you know, the true role of what the bass should do. In my view, anyway.
So how do you define that, Bob? The true role of the bass.
Role of the bass. Well, I think the bass should complement the music and the song, including the vocal melody, the guitar parts, any riffs, without getting in the way, and also complement the drummer with the you know, the percussion. So you play in the groove with the percussion, but I think it should be a little imaginative as well, so that you can have, you know, you can still have little bass melodies that you know, don't get in the way of the vocal melody or the guitar parts, but make it interesting as a bass part. You know, and I think one of the great players for doing that was Paul McCartney. He played some lovely little bass melodies, and Jack Bruce did it. You know.
Well, you know, Paul work, you know, we study your work, of course, and we study Entwistle and John Paul Jones and Jack, of course. But, you know, the discovery that I made about Paul that I wasn't aware of, you know, in the early, I call it, you know, the Beatlemania era of his playing, you know, it's a lot of root fifth type lines, but he was quite ingenious with inverting the figure, so that even though he was playing basically off the roots and fifth, he would invert to the fifth back to the root over the change.
Sometimes
you get these automatic melodies.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. Make it interesting, and he makes it so it's not so predictable.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it was like, I looked it over and I said, you know, this is amazing, because every time he does this, even though it's root fifth, he's creating a signature melody to the song.
That's right, yeah. He was very complimentary to what went on with, you know, the vocal melodies, and what Ringo was doing on the drums. He added power to it, and almost like gave the bass drum melodic notes.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And yeah, it was. I always found it very interesting and
now Paul,
lovely player.
Now here's the thing: I think Paul plays with a pick on a lot of the early recordings. And then uses his fingers later on. But you're mostly a pick player. Is that correct?
Well, I noticed, I think Paul played fingerstyle in the same sort of situations that I did. And that is, if it's a rocking song, or if it's a hard-nosed song, or that sort of thing, you tend to use a pick for the drive and the precision. But if it's a bit more laid-back song, like a ballad, or maybe something you might use a fretless bass on, or something like that, fingerstyle seems to work better, from my expression anyway, for me personally. And that wasn't something I thought, oh, Paul does that, I'll do that. I just did it automatically, you know. If it's, you know, mostly pick stuff, but sometimes fingers, just because it feels right to do it that way.
Yes. Well, you know, I tell you a very interesting story about you and the pick. I read a very early interview on you, right about the time, I guess, when Diary came out.
Right.
But you said, well, I play with a plectrum.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, being from the States, I didn't know what this is.
Oh, you didn't know what a plectrum was?
No, we call it a pick, you know. But I read this thing where you use the word plectrum, so I, of course, had to go down to the local music store and ask for a plectrum immediately. And everyone looked at me like
I... Did they know what it was?
No, they looked at me like I had 3 heads. And then finally, a fella came out. And then a fella came out and he said he's looking for a pick for the bass, and then they kind of explained it away to me. Finally, when you did Flying High Again, you used the Hofner bass on that line. Is that correct, Bob?
Yep, yeah. My old '63 original Hofner Beatle bass. It was. I bought it in about mid-'70s, 76, 77. And I had always wanted one, you know, and I saw one in London where I was living in Orange Music.
Right.
And they had one in there. It was £90 at the time, and I thought, great, and I got it. And I didn't know at the time of buying it that the best year was the 63, because that's what his lordship used.
Sure, right. Yeah.
McCartney, you know.
Sure.
You know, really out of ignorance, I bought that just because I liked it. Yeah, that was the year to have,
Sure.
was the 63, because Paul's was a 63, you know. So, but it was great. For, you know, I tried a couple of different basses on that particular track, Flying High Again, and I just wasn't happy with how the part sat or how it felt. And I thought, I'll try. I had the Beatle bass with me. I thought, I'll give that a whirl. And when I tried it, I thought, yep, there you go. That sounds right for that. So I ended up using that.
You know, speaking on this number on Flying High Again, the bass figure that you play behind the riff, you know, I can't remember if you're hitting on if it's an and 2 and 4 feel or if it's
it is. Yeah, it's sort of an off thing, and I thought, you know, I didn't want to pump, and I didn't want to just follow Randy. I wanted to make it more of a groove thing and a bit of a groove statement, and it sort of slotted in between.
The thing was, it fits really beautifully, and yet it's not the typical decision. Let's say
no,
that,
that's right.
You know,
Yeah. It was purely a feel thing. I thought, God, what can I do here? And Randy had this riff, and you know, quite often, and especially on that song, it was just the three of us working. Lee Kerslake, Randy, and myself. You know,
right.
A lot of the time Ozzy wasn't there. You know, it was
Sure.
us working stuff out.
Now, Jack Bruce is a pretty big influence on you at a time in your career early on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What can we talk a little bit about? You know, what Jack did to your mind, as it were.
Well, see, the thing with Cream, you know, Clapton was a real purist blueser, and he had you know, lots of stuff from his favourite guitarists like Albert King and Buddy Guy and all the people he listened to. But Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker were more. They'd had a bit of a jazz background.
Yeah, it's very educated.
Yeah, and that's where the improvisation thing came from. Was the rhythm section of Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, which I just found so imaginative. You know, there's Jack playing very aggressively with that. You know, being a trio, he could afford to overplay a bit and still make it groove and still make musical statements without waffling on too much, you know.
Yeah.
And his sound, that growly Gibson EB3 through the Marshall stack, that growly sound, it was just so aggressive. But then again, with aggression, he still had the melodic lines, you know, making musical statements, and quite often a bit off the wall for rock or even blues. You know, it was his background of jazz. You know, really came in handy for playing sort of weird combinations of notes and that as well.
Yeah, there are quite a few quirky ones in there, aren't there? Though.
Oh yeah.
Now, so Bob, is that why you use that same setup? You know, through the Marshall head with the EB3 for the Blizzard album?
Not because he used it. I think I was influenced to get an EB3 in my early days because of Jack and loving that growly, aggressive sound. But the reason I used the Marshall is because for some reason those Gibson basses sound best through a Marshall. I had tried them to other amps, through an SVT,
right.
Through an acoustic stack, and they just don't get that sound, you know, the true sound, unless you are through a Marshall. So I said to Randy, well, you know, because Randy had a couple of Marshall stacks there of his, and he's only using one to record, so I said, well, I'll use one of your stacks, and he said, yeah, sure, you know. So I put that Gibson EB3 through one of his white 100-watt Marshall heads and one of his 4x12 cabs.